Panzerblitz Situation 2 is more dynamic than Situation 1, but it feels less balanced. This is a tough one for the Germans to win, but the Russians have to stay on their toes also. Let's dive into the strategy in more detail to see what approach is best here today on Legendary Tactics. And now a quick word from this video's sponsor. As before, we will start with the Wargamers Guide to Panzerblitz, and specifically Bob Harmon's analysis in his Commander's Notebook. Let's start with the analysis of the victory conditions. The Russians have a clear advantage here. They just need to place a single unit 8 hexes from the north edge for a marginal victory, 12 hexes for a tactical victory, or 18 hexes, which is about halfway down the board, for a decisive victory. The Germans have to destroy at least 10 enemy units in order to achieve a marginal victory, 20 for a tactical victory, and an unbelievable 30 units for a decisive victory, in 10 turns. Starting with the Soviets, the bulk of their force is infantry. Because there are only 4 units to transport, including 1 horse-drawn wagon, and 1 armored fighting vehicle, most of the time the infantry is going to have to walk to victory. The Russian artillery here is strong, and if it's positioned well, it can command a good deal of the board. The key to a decisive victory here is going to be the AFV, or, in a pinch, the trucks. This is because they can exploit a gap in the German lines to get to a hex on the board they'll be hard to catch. Keep your eyes open for opportunities to infiltrate. Because the Soviets deploy across the entire width of the board, there will be some more flexibility in terms of where and when you push your advantage. Just try to keep the ball moving downfield, and you should be fine. For the Germans, this is going to be a tough one. Holding the Soviets back from advancing to row H is pretty much impossible, and even preventing their tactical victory seems implausible. The best you can hope for is to avoid a decisive victory and consider that a win. Taking a look at the forces you have to work with, there's not much. There's some decent AFVs and plenty of transportation, but the weapons the Germans have are mostly Type A, which is not that effective against infantry. It's unfortunate that almost all of the Russian force is made up of infantry. The best you can do is to destroy the Russian AFV, and hopefully a truck or two as well, which greatly limits the enemy's mobility and makes it much harder for them to achieve a decisive victory. But be prepared for the Russian player to hold those back a bit with a goal of a late-game breakthrough and run down the board. You can also hope that some of the infantry will be left in the open so you can do an overrun or two, but don't count on it, especially given the amount of cover on board 1. And speaking of the boards themselves, board 1 can be reasonably contested, and perhaps board 2, but board 3 is just too open to defend. With that in mind, come in on either board 1 or board 2, as board 3 has too many open gaps, and rush to get your forces where they need to be, reasonably far forward and in good cover. And also, make a special effort to try to not lose ground on board 1 to motorized advance units, as it might be tough to claw that territory back. It's a decent idea to put the 120mm artillery on or near Hill 132, which will help cover boards 2 and 3, hopefully dispersing the head of each column and slowing the infantry down a little bit. Also, consider putting the two 81mm at board 3 hex Q6 to tie up the Soviet recon units. But otherwise, you're just going to have to do your best and make the most of the situation. Try to stay flexible in your approach, and with a few lucky die rolls, you might just do okay. And so we have finished Situation 2, and the Germans, sadly, tragically, have lost to a decisive victory.
But not wholly unexpected. We did, going in,
yeah.
Reading up on it, we knew that Germany was up against it.
Yes, and I conceded at the end of turn 10.
Yeah.
Basically it was over as soon as you got through. So, but let's talk some strategy here. So what, and our thoughts on the scenario. So, first of all, what was your overall strategy to begin?
So I would have to say that I was trying to get the mortars into good positions, and my howitzers into good positions. You did actually take out one of my two of my mortars, and the one really big one early, which on board 1 there. And that was a bit of a stinger. I remember thinking, I was actually upset with myself for leaving it a little too exposed. So
yes, I think for the experienced players watching these, they'll be laughing at us because we're still pretty new at this, and we're making very kind of silly blunders that way. But
but we are there's it's the fun of playing it too, I think. So
yeah,
having a good time.
Absolutely.
But so I thought, okay, and then I just thought. Linger back a little bit. Actually, the big play though was just to sort of play cat and mouse with you, but line it up so that these trucks, with the 12 movement trucks, there were in a position on a road at the end. And I actually had 2 of them. I had one here in Grabosh as well. To basically just boot down the road on my very last turn. I had last position on turn 10.
Yes.
And so that was actually just to arrange myself. So board 1 is just too much of a cluster. I just couldn't. And you just nicely log jammed it there. I had no smooth actions there.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of a stalemate. But I actually was in winning position even there as the board lies right now.
Oh yeah, I think in this one the Germans have, if they get away with marginal loss,
that's a win.
They let the Russians have a marginal victory. I can't imagine how the Russians can't get at least a marginal victory in this.
Yeah, it seemed really. I actually got the sense a little bit from you at the end. It was a bit frustrating.
For me?
Did you feel frustrated by scenario 2? Just because it's such an uphill battle. It's an impossible battle.
It's kind of an impossible battle in some ways, but I'm sure there's some strategic kind of positioning and so forth where you can maybe at least not lose decisively. You can maybe lose, marginally or tactically, but yeah, staving off a decisive victory in this is tough.
And it should be said too, your rolls were not great this game.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
You had a bit of bad luck with the rolling,
rolls,
I think.
Little bit of luck in key moments could have been a lot more effective for sure.
What was your German strategy?
So it's really funny because I think we're both newer to this game, and I think that was actually part of my strategy because I thought I need to show strength where I don't really have, like those mortars in the middle board, they kept all those infantry hiding in the town. And I don't know, it's just funny because I'm only strength 6 and most of your defenses were, these ones were weaker, but you had a couple 16s there. And, I'm seeing all these infantry units by Adski, not kind of just bogged down, hiding out in the woods. I'm like, all right. So I just tried to puff myself up and kind of make myself seem more intimidating than I actually was.
Well, I can rebut that for you on board 3, where those 2 guys are that I have moved up. I was actually quite nervous to do that, more because of the overrun on your tanks.
Oh, really?
So I didn't want your tanks coming and just rolling and just taking free guys, because I was very cognizant and even with the guys hovering in the back, I didn't want to put them into the open. I didn't want to push them forward because that's more opportunity for you to take pieces. And I knew your win condition is 10. So the longer that I was willing to sit back there and just just keep trying to look busy. It is all I was really trying to do all game. Like, look, I was moving here or there, just sort of little puttery movements, but very much just trying to stay in the shadows until the last where I sprung.
And that's maybe the best thing. I felt like I stymied you on board 1.
Absolutely.
And I held you back enough on board 3 that I was happy, but board 2 is where all the damage began to accumulate. And it was, and I did lose that one tank. That was sloppy of me. The half track I wasn't worried about, but what I should have been doing is maybe, like, for example, moving this truck up and using it to, to blockade the bridge there a little bit. And, these trucks, it's very gamey. It's not very historical, but, just pile up like wrecks on top of the bridge so you can't get past it. You know what I mean?
Yes, that actually would have been detrimental.
Like if I piled up a bunch of wrecks on top of the the bridge here.
Yes.
That would have maybe slowed you down a bit. I don't know. I think really the Germans need to get this tank.
Yeah.
The trucks you can kind of maybe deal with because they're weak, but that tank is the one key part of your win.
Right.
Here.
Yes. Yeah, and that was the critical piece at the very end, on turn 9 where I rushed it forth, and it was just able to survive, which would have brought it. Actually, we mathed it out, and it would have come right off the board. So I would have on the next move been able to move it off. So
yes,
but
right off the
definitely
board.
A decisive. What is it? Decisive.
Yes, decisive. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So, but I think that the Germans have a tough go, but I think it's all about you have to be willing to lose some pieces, gradually, and ideally, if you can create kind of roadblocks or things to slow obstacles, basically with wrecks. That's really where you're. I think especially blocking like a bridge. If I had blocked here, it's all like identifying the choke points, right? Ultimately, maybe even like these trucks here could have been utilized to do that, right? Like send these guys over here, have them blown up. Go ahead, blow them up.
But do it right on the bridge.
But do it right on the bridge, and that slows down, the attack. I was just hoping to run out the clock, really, and I did get some bad rolling, but I think that's all you can hope for is to run out the clock and hope that this wherever you've positioned yourself, you can see this guy.
Yeah.
And so yeah.
So what did you think of game 2, scenario 2? What was your overall thought on the actual game?
I might be missing some of the nuance of it, but I do feel like it's very, very slanted. Like I just don't see how if you're a good Russian player, how do you
prevent
how do you not
avalanche,
get a decisive victory? Yeah, how do you not get at least a tactical victory? Certainly, but to hold you back even to a marginal victory is pretty much impossible. So I don't know. I mean, I'm not someone that necessarily needs balance like to a really strict degree, but it would have been helpful to have maybe a little bit more of a balance here.
Okay.
For me, it just felt like I was, it's an impossible task, and you just do the best you can.
Exactly. So and that's a hard mindset to go into the game with because they give you, but your win condition is slightly different. Your win condition is 10 units.
Yeah, but all your units have like 16. I mean, I can disrupt you a bunch.
Yeah.
But with 16 defense. Especially when they're hiding in the woods or whatever, or 18 defense for the guards. Like, my only hope is to maybe snipe a few trucks or artillery pieces. Maybe some of the recon units or maybe the engineer. But really, it's the 10 units.
It's hard
just
to
looking at your order of battle. Maybe if I get a couple, the mortars, and it's pretty tough, but basically I just have to kill off all the mortars and transports.
Right.
And then that might work.
Yeah. And those, okay. Okay.
But it's still, even then and again, that's a marginal victory.
Right.
The tactical is destroy 20 units, and decisive is to destroy everybody.
Yeah, I'm
like, who designed this?
Yeah.
Like, who's, who's ever gonna get like let's set the bar
A little bit lower, eh?
a little bit lower here, because I'm never gonna be able to wipe out your entire force. Like they're pretty close to it, whatever.
Yeah.
It's impossible. So it's a weird scenario in that sense. It's just like you're given this impossible task.
Right.
And it's what is also weird about it is it's the second scenario. So presuming that people play this through in sort of chronological order,
they're going to get a very
is the
stilted view
second-
of the Germans on turn 2.
yes, like the first situation feels like a very kind of introductory scenario, and that's fine. It worked well in that.
Now
capacity.
it was almost in the reverse though. I felt it very much in the reverse, and that was one of my observations. Was in the first game as the Russians, I did a lot of puzzling, and
Yes.
I felt you were very static. In the second game, I felt there was a few times in our game where you were like, I could just hear your wheels turning, because you were
Yes.
you were
Yeah,
doing all the puzzling, and I was a little more static. So
Yeah.
I do really appreciate the reversal of the brain juices flowing there. So that was one observation.
Yeah, as a scenario, what do you think of it?
So that was the first thing I noticed right away, was that it was way more intense on the German end of figuring things out.
Yeah.
The second thing
Yes.
I picked up pretty quickly was that of the 3, every board kind of was telling its own story to me.
Yeah.
And boards 1 and 3 honestly weren't very interesting to me, but board 2,
Yeah.
all I wanted to do while we were playing was play board 2.
Yes.
And I couldn't really care about board 1 or 3 at all. Like, it was almost like, I gave them, a courtesy move, and then board 2 is where I wanted to do my puzzling. So
Yes.
I'm really wondering if that for other players, if that's an experience that they've had where, they kind of, you almost get tunnel vision on one of the 3 boards.
Yeah.
Did you find that yourself,
Yeah.
or not really?
No, I found it. Well, board 3 had nothing happening on it for
Ever.
pretty much the whole game. But I found enough interest in board 1 to try and set things up so that I could hold you back.
Okay.
I was trying to think, like, do I send this armor back to across all the way to board 2,
Right.
to help out, or what? Have I got enough forces to hold back your forces on board 1? So there was a bit of thinking that way, and so forth. Board 3 was it was nothing going on, but board 2 was also interesting. I think it was more interesting for you in general, because a lot of it is just me just sitting back and shooting with my mortar.
Yeah, and it felt like
armor.
you created such a good choke point on board 1 that there wasn't a lot of interest there for me, because I had nothing that I could really do.
Yes.
Except go up against, just kind of like slug my way through it, right? So.
Yes, and so that's, I think it's all about containing this armor unit as best you can, and maybe the trucks as well.
Yeah.
But the trucks, I'm a little less worried about. What's interesting is that the scenario does end on your movement,
Yes.
which to me gives you the opportunity to just kind of, without zones of control in this game, as long as you get close to, let's say row K or something, what's to stop you from getting to row R? Oh, nothing.
Nothing. Yeah, I think and I'm wondering if perhaps your key objective in the game is to target all my transports.
Yeah,
maybe not
the
3 movement horse and buggy so much.
Yeah, not the horse-drawn stuff, but yeah, maybe it's just go all in on
the vehicles,
the armored fighting vehicle and the trucks.
Yeah, you got to get those, because then you really hamper my movement.
Yes, although really, I mean, they can move 9, and if they have access to a road, they can certainly move more. So they can certainly scoot down to get I think a tactical victory, even from fairly far back.
They can, but I mean, they're not going to get.
So,
they're not. It's going to be a lot harder and slower.
Yes, true.
So,
true. Yeah, but I mean, this scenario, I'd be very curious for our viewers to give us their thoughts on this scenario as to whether this is one that they enjoy replaying. I enjoyed playing it, but I don't know if I'm that drawn to it again.
Yeah. No, I agree. It was an interesting interesting puzzle to sort of work through. Yeah. But do I want to work through it again? I think I'd prefer to go see the next one.
Yeah, and I think from what I've been reading, Situation 3 is a much more kind of balanced and nuanced kind of setup, and so I'd like to see that one next, and I'd like to see, as we add more units and so forth, getting a lot more kind of the movement, the wide ranging tank formations and stuff that this game kind of promises. So,
Right.
Yeah. Any other final thoughts on this scenario?
You know what? I did enjoy it. Or at least I enjoyed parts of it for sure. And it wasn't, like I said, it was a really interesting little puzzle to sort out. How about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it. As I said, I don't know if feel that drawn to it to play it again, but I could be proven wrong if, for example, one of our viewers points out some great strategies the Germans can use or something like that. I'd be tempted to try it again, just to try those out and see if I could fare any better. But I think it's just tempering your expectations as to what's possible.
That's right. So if you're looking forward to seeing part 3, then stay tuned, because that is the next one on our agenda here.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for watching. This is Legendary Tactics.